This is going to be the craziest video you'll ever see in your life. Nah, I'm playing. Welcome to Chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man. So, you know, like I said before, you guys do know that we have the Superbet Rapid and Blitz going on in Warsaw, Poland right now. And so I have the third round game for you between Kirill Shevchenko. It's the first time I've ever seen his name. So Shevchenko and Wesley. And it's a really interesting game. And so let me see. For all of my people that are in the Philippines, they should be kind of starting to get up. It's 5:29 a.m. so they still kind of sleep. But I'll say mabuhay to you. Kamusta na aking makaibigan. Let me see. Magandang umaga, magandang hapon. If you see this after what, like 6 or 7 hours, and it's the afternoon for you. Almusal tayo, mag lunch na tayo. Appreciate you guys very much. Maraming salamat aking makaibigan. For anybody who is coming from Ukraine or who does speak Ukrainian, I actually just learned how to say hello and thank you, and it's like eerily similar to Russian, so it shouldn't take me much to actually say it. And a slight difference. Hello is a privet. I believe that's how you pronounce it. And a spasibi. I believe that's how you say it. Let me see. Yeah, spasibi. Yeah, so instead of privet or spasibo, you know, it is just a touch different. So, you know, anyways, if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have in this game. Bam, let me get my volume up. I remember the last, it was good. Okay, we're good. All right, so we got e4, e5, a knight to f3. We see knight to c6, bishop to b5. So we do have the Roy Lopez, and knight to f6. Brings us to the Spanish game. Well, not the Spanish game, the Berlin. My bad. We were already in the Spanish game. But as you guys do know, and it's super not the case for this game, because this game is super, you know, decisive. This is very notoriously drawn. But we do kind of start branching off into more of a sideline pretty quickly. So we got castles by white. Knight takes e4, which is all very standard stuff. And of course, you guys know, you know, rook e1 comes, d4 comes. You know, you kind of got to get out of dodge because that is putting the king in the line of fire. So we do see rook to e1, knight back to d6. And a lot of times you'll see like bishop taking c6, or, you know, just the bishop retreating back, which is what we see in this game. Bishop back to f1. We see bishop to e7, and then we actually see a less common move. It's one of the moves, but it's a little less common. It's knight to c3. And you are not, you know, trying to get the pawn back immediately. But it does become, you know, quite hard to get this pawn back if you haven't done it by now. So you'll actually see this in action. So we do see f6. Wesley Soldier says, hey, man, you know, you're giving me a pawn. You know, let me go ahead and just keep that. See if I could just hold on to it real quick. So we do have d4. The knight comes back to f7, which looks a little bit strange. But in an effort to try to hold on to this e5 pawn, knight to f7 does make a lot of sense. So we do see knight to d5. And then we have the novelty of the game, which is castles. And as you guys know, you know, whenever you come to a novelty, which is castles, it's always interesting because, you know, castles is such a logical move to make pretty much in any position. Unless you're castling into checkmate, of course. So we do have c4. We got d6. Bishop comes to d3, which the computer actually really doesn't like. You know, it's wanting you to kind of just like start b4, b5 immediately because, you know, black is able to start getting their pawns rolling with f5 and e4, which you see Wesley so do. We got f5 and e4 is definitely on tap. So you kind of have to do something, you know, to, you know, go against that. And we do see b4 in the position, but as you guys surely know, you know, tempo is very, very crucial in certain positions. And this was a position where tempo was very crucial. So after we see b4, of course, we see e4. And this actually does look like it is just forking the bishop and the knight. But there is something you have to be careful about, and I'll mention that in a minute. We do see b5, a very logical counterattack. After the knight comes to b8, you see knight down to d2. And the thing I said I was going to mention before, you can't quite take this bishop yet because you are looking at giving up your bishop on e7. and it is supported by this rook. So it wasn't a true fork. Like I said, there was a way that you could kind of get out of it. And so, it's still very logical. Black definitely does have a nice advantage, but, white's not like just completely losing or anything. So we do see bishop to g5, just, attacking that knight on d2. And then now the bishop saves itself by going to c2. We see bishop to e6. And then we do have f3 in the position. We got c6 just continuing to put pressure on that knight. And then we do see pawn taking e4, and it was already like pretty nice for black, but it starts to go a little bit more downhill for white from here. Backing up after we saw c6, it was actually just probably a little bit better just to kind of give the pawn away instead of giving an entire piece. So the knight would come back down to c3, and then after the bishop came to f6, after knight to b3, bishop taking on c4. This is kind of how you have to play if you want to hold on to the piece, because as we know, a pawn is a lot less valuable than an actual piece. But that is not what happened. Like I said, we did see pawn taking e4. The pawn takes d5, and then we do have e takes d5, and then the bishop just drops back to c8. And Wesley So is up an entire piece, and he only had to give away a pawn for it, which is pretty standard. It's pretty normal, pretty normally what you will do when you win a piece is just kind of give up a pawn. And so white does have a lot of pawns, but I mean, black definitely has, the extra piece, and they have a really solid position. You're pretty much not attacking this king at any point in time in the future. So we do see a4, we got a6, just breaking down, the gigantic pawn clump that white has in the board. We got knight to f3, bishop takes c1, rook takes c1, because black is also happy to trade. Wesley So was like, yeah, man, like, please trade me pieces. Because if you can just basically continue to trade down, you are going to be in a situation where black is just going to have a piece. You'll have an extra pawn, but it's probably going to be kind of hard for you to win that with just having an extra pawn without the piece. So we do have b6. The queen comes up to d2. We have g6, and then we have... It's not the absolute best move, but it's kind of like a super cute move that I think that Shevchenko plays, and it's rook to e6. And this is kind of a poison rook. If you do happen to want to try to take it, you are going to be getting a lot back for taking that rook as white. You're already down the piece, but if you do give up this bishop and allow this pawn to basically correct itself, you have given white a lot back. If we see that bishop taking e6, pawn taking e6, knight back to h8, and then bishop to b3, you can see that this pawn push is very live, and you are going to kind of have like a lot of passed pawns here. So you kind of get a little bit more compensation for losing the piece. But of course, Wesley So is not going to do that. So after we see rook to e6, we see pawn takes b5, pawn takes b5. We see knight down to d7. So basically what Wesley So is trying to do is just make sure that he plays as solidly as possible. And at some point down the line, this piece is just going to be a complete piece. He's not going to have any weaknesses in his position, and he's just going to be able to just basically steamroll it home. So we do see rook c to e1. We got knight down to f6. Just continuously trying to improve his pieces. Why not try to put this knight down here on e4? We do see queen to f4. Rook comes down to a7. We're just trying to protect this 7th rank. So when you do win a pawn, whatever side you're playing, it is legitimate for you to actually play somewhat defensively. Even though you are up a piece and it might kind of seem like, man, I could just like trying to do something crazy. Sometimes the best thing to do, like I said, is just to play defensively. Just make sure that your opponent, doesn't get anything. Because a lot of the times, when you do win a piece, you do kind of overextend yourself just a little bit. So, playing defensively is not a bad thing. So rook 6 comes back to e2. We see rook over to e8, and something kind of has to give. One of the rooks is going to have to be traded off. So we do see rook taking e8 with check, knight taking e8. We do see h3, just creating some lift for the king. Excuse me. The knight comes back down to f6. We see king to h2. We got king to g7, bishop to b3. And as you guys can see, compared to earlier, this doesn't have as much oomph behind it because this king is not on this diagonal. So pushing pawns here and stuff like that isn't going to be, you know, super duper crazy. Plus, you do have the knight and the queen both on this pawn, so you don't want to just give away pawns. We do see h6. We see queen down to e3. We got knight to g5, knight takes g5, pawn takes g5. And we have actually reached a point in the game that if you do want to pause the video and try and guess what move white plays in this position, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So, there is a right, well, I mean, there's a right train of thought and a wrong train of thought in this position. And it is, I think it's probably pretty easy to go wrong in this position because something does look very juicy. And what I'm talking about is this pawn here. But Shevchenko actually goes king to g1. Now, you had a lot of moves in this position, but absolutely under no circumstances do you want to capture this pawn. And I will show you exactly why. It might kind of seem like, hey, I'm getting this pawn, we're good to go. But the problem is if you capture here, then you're going to be looking at knight to g4 with check, and that is discovering an attack on the undefended queen. Now, you don't normally see this. You normally see it with the bishop, you know, kind of like the classic bishop discovery attack. But, you know, in these close proximity, you can see it with a knight. So, like, think very carefully, you know, when you are taking a pawn. So, like I said, to sidestep that, we do see king to g1. And then, you know, Wesley so recognizes that now that pawn is, you know, available for capture. He goes g4. And it makes a lot of sense because, you know, either you're going to get the knight in a better position or you're going to kind of rip open black's king side. In either of those is going to be good. So we do see h4 trying to keep the position as closed as possible. We do see king to f7. Queen goes to g5. We see rook to e7, encouraging another trade. But of course, white does not want to trade by, you know, for any reason. We do see rook to f1. We see queen over to h8. We got c5. Knight comes down to e4. We see queen to e3. And this does, unfortunately, abandon the pawn on h4. So now white is dropping a pawn. And now all of the pawns are completely equal. We do see pawn taking d6. We got g3. And then after rook to e1 is the very, very nice first move for like the roller coaster that's going on, and it is queen to h2 with check, forcing the king over to f1. And then after this, the super duper accurate knight to d2 with check. And it is in this position that Shevchenko resigns the game. And maybe if you guys cannot see why, I will show you why. There is only two moves possible in this position. One of them automatically is a mate in one, and I'll show you the mate in one. For any of you guys that thought I could just take the knight, right? No, this is mate in one. You see the little checkmate symbol on the king. It's checkmate. So the only other move that you can make, because you are in check, is to move king to e2. I don't even have to make the move that it suggests. I mean, there's two moves that it suggests. I mean, I think you can see both of them. Rook takes the queen with check, and that's just like completely just blowing the position up. Or queen over here, just tossing in kind of like an I hate you check first before you do that. It sucks. It really sucks. Okay. But like I said, this was the position right here that Shevchenko does resign the game. And so Wesley So has 2 wins. But man, how about this one-a-thon Anand though? He took like 5 months off and he literally just won all 3 of his games today. So he is the complete leader in the thing right now. And I mean, we know he was a world champion at one point, but he's not so much of an active player like he used to be. I mean, he used to be much more active, but he's been playing since I think the late 80s. So, I mean, he's definitely like, you know, one of the veterans in the game, like, you know, Gary Kasparov and stuff like that, and Anatoly Karpov, who still got it. You know, they might not be all the way up there, but I mean, for him to come through in this tournament and be, you know, some of the best players on the planet, I mean, that says a lot about, you know, just the strength that Anand still has under his belt. But I appreciate you guys very much. Spasibi for coming by. Meron salamat, aking makaibigan. And I'll see everybody next time.